Hello, I'm Annette Young and welcome to the 51%, a show about women reshaping our world. Coming up. And despite the chaotic outcome of the American presidential election, the 4 Democratic women of colour who make up the so-called squad have been voted back into Congress. Also, after hundreds of thousands took to the street in anger, the Polish government delays the publication of a constitutional court ruling that would introduce an almost total ban on abortion. We'll be talking to Leah Hoctor, the Europe Director for the Centre for Reproductive Rights. Plus, taking to the high seas, we meet the women competing in this year's Vendée Globe, a non-stop round-the-world yacht race. But we begin in the US, which has experienced an extraordinary nail-biting outcome to its presidential election. Yet one defining result was the re-election to Congress of 4 female Democratic representatives, often referred to as the Squad. The 4 women of colour, including New York's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, made their names as they championed such causes as universal healthcare and climate change, much to the ire of Donald Trump.
They've endured racism and misogyny from Donald Trump over the past 2 years. But that didn't stop these 4 Democratic congresswomen, known as the Squad, from securing their seats again. After making history in 2018, the 4 progressive women of colour comfortably secured second terms. The first black Muslim woman elected to Congress, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, took to Twitter to declare, "Our sisterhood is resilient."
We shifted the narrative of who can serve in Congress. We changed rules so that a Muslim woman with a hijab can vote on the House floor.
Despite a concerted campaign against her, New York Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez cruised to victory. AOC, as she's known, said serving New York and fighting for working-class families in Congress has been the greatest honour, privilege and responsibility. AOC and the rest of the Squad have been shaking up the House of Representatives since they were first elected in 2018 midterms. Ayanna Pressley of Massachusetts acknowledged this in her message to supporters, saying, "Together we have fought for our shared humanity. We've organised, we've mobilised. I believe in the power of us, and we're just getting started." After regaining her seat, Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan simply sent a shout-out to her hometown, Detroit. The 4 lawmakers have attracted both admiration and ire for their progressive positions and willingness to take on the establishment.
Those maniacs, AOC +3, these people, they're maniacs who don't like our country. You know, do you think Ilhan Omar, how the hell did she get elected? I guess she's got a little group of people.
Trump's frequent attacks only spurred on the 4 progressives and their supporters. And the Squad, in fact, grew this election, notably with Black Lives Matter activist Cori Bush of Missouri joining them in Congress for the first time.
Now to Poland, whose right-wing nationalist government has delayed the publication of a constitutional court ruling that would introduce an almost total ban on abortion. It comes after some of the biggest protests in recent Polish history. Once the ruling comes into effect, abortions would only be possible in cases of rape, incest, and where the mother's life or health is at risk. This in a country with already some of the world's strictest laws on terminations. Joining me now from Geneva is Leah Hoctor, the Regional Director for Europe at the Centre for Reproductive Rights. Leah, thank you for your time. The Polish government has delayed publishing the court's ruling. What exactly does that mean?
Well, I think it's clear that the Polish government underestimated the level of opposition in Polish society to these kinds of rollbacks and restrictions on gender equality and on women's access to abortion care. Polls have long shown that the Polish public does not support the further restriction of women's access to abortion care in the country. In fact, the government Law and Justice Party has tried for years to roll back women's access to abortion through legislative processes in the parliament. They have not been able to do that because there has not been support in the Polish parliament for the introduction of these types of measures.
But are those protests a sign that the demographics are indeed changing in this Central European nation?
I think that the protests are certainly showing that the views of the current Polish population and its current demographic makeup are not not supportive of restrictions of women's access to abortion care. And I think, in fact, the views of the Polish people, who it appears are in favour of women's access to care, in favour of gender equality, align with the views of populations across the region, across Europe. And we have seen numerous governments in recent years liberalise laws on abortion in light of the views of the public and in light of changing public opinion. I think it's very clear, for example, that the referendum results in Ireland just reaffirmed that public support in Europe for women's access to healthcare when they need it during pregnancy, including abortion.
Leah, as you just said there, this Constitutional Court ruling in Poland is certainly out of line with other EU member states. As you mentioned, Ireland, for instance, voting in and approving abortion in 2018. But can you just give us a sense of what the situation is like at the moment within the European bloc?
This ruling in Poland is wholly unprecedented. I mean, if this ruling goes into effect, it will essentially be the first time that any EU member state in recent history has removed a ground for legal abortion from its law. So in that sense, this ruling is wholly out of step, wholly unprecedented within the European Union. But also, as you mentioned, Poland's laws on abortion, even before this ruling, are among the most restrictive in Europe. Within the EU, for example, Poland is only one of 2 member states, together with Malta, that does not allow abortion on request or on very broad social grounds. I mean, it's not just Ireland in the past 3 years that has moved considerably in terms of liberalising its abortion laws. It's also Cyprus, it's also Iceland. We've also seen reforms, the removal of legal barriers in Belgium, in Germany, and reforms that would liberalise abortion laws are underway in France, in Belgium, as we speak. So I think the trend across the region has been in favour of recognising that women need abortion care during pregnancy and to legalise that care and to make it accessible for them. That has been the trend. The situation in Poland is wholly out of step with that overwhelming approach.
Is the EU, as a result, able to implement some sort of consistent approach among its member states, or is it left strictly up to each country? I mean, does the EU have any power in this area?
There are avenues, accountability mechanisms, infringement proceedings that the EU can use to enforce its laws and to ensure that member states comply with EU values and EU fundamental rights provisions. So we will have to see whether or not it will be possible for the Union to include the recent developments in Poland on abortion within those processes that may be underway on the rule of law. In general, what is clear to us is that EU member states really do look to the practice of other states on these issues. It was clear in Ireland, for example, that understanding that Ireland's laws on abortion were wholly out of step with the laws almost entirely of the other EU member states was something that really resonated for lawmakers in Ireland and for the Irish public. And I think it is clear that European governments and populations do look around the Union, look to the practices that are considered to be best practices within the Union, and we have often seen them moving laws and policies into line with those best practices.
Leah Hoctor, it's been great speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And finally, it's a sailing competition like none other. The Vendée Globe is a solo non-stop race around the world which covers a distance of some 40,000 kilometres. And this year, a record number of women are taking part, as Selena Sykes reports.
Never has the Vendée Globe attracted so many competitors. 33 skippers are setting off this year, but that's not the only record organisers are proud of. For the first time, 6 women are taking part. Among them is Isabel Joske. The 43-year-old Franco-German is an experienced navigator, but is taking a leap into the unknown.
Sailing around South America is the thing that scares me the most, but excites me at the same time. There's also the fear of the unknown. I know I'm doing something very difficult, but I don't really realise quite how tough it's going to be.
One competitor knows exactly what to expect. Samantha Davies is racing for the third time. After finishing in 4th place in 2009 and pulling out in 2012, British skipper who lives in France is eyeing up a podium finish this year.
It's amazing that the Vendée Globe is, there's no division of women or men. We're all racing for the same goal, and it's totally possible that a woman one day can win the Vendée Globe.
Samantha will be keeping a watchful eye on one boat in particular. She'll be competing against her French husband, Romain Attanasio. It's the first time a couple are participating in the same edition of the round-the-world sailing race. While the pair have already been at sea together, it's the longest period of time they'll both be spending away from home. A commitment which requires a lot of organisation, especially for their 9-year-old son, Ruben, who will be living with his grandparents.
During the race, normally the sailor's other half closes up the house and throws out the rubbish before returning the keys of the flat we rented out. With us, we leave the rubbish and put the keys under the doormat. It's added stress, but that's how it is. We're used to it. And then we have our son Ruben, who stays behind, so we spend quite a lot of time organising his care.
The Vendée Globe is one of the few sporting events where men and women compete alongside each other, though not necessarily on a completely equal footing.
Women will be perhaps more careful about keeping energy in their reserves and will anticipate things more. They'll protect their boats more. Ultimately, this tactic may also pay off and secure a good finish.
All 6 female participants are hoping for a smooth race around the world and may even dare to dream of following in the footsteps of Dame Ellen MacArthur, the only woman to have achieved a podium finish at the Vendée Globe.
And that's it for this edition. You can also connect with us via our Facebook page, that of course being France24.51%, or do send us a tweet at _51%. So until our next show, bye for now.